Welcome to my course, Game Development Basics, Week 7, Lesson 5, Saving and Loading in Unreal Engine. In this lesson, we'll describe Unreal Engine's built-in SaveGame class, then we'll demonstrate creating a SaveGame class, and then we'll demonstrate loading and saving to a file. In weeks 5 and 6, we made a lot of progress on this game, and it's coming along well. The issue at the moment is that every time the player closes the game and reopens it, they need to start all over again. And while this may be fine for some games, a game like this, we may want the player to be able to return to a previously saved state. For this, we're going to need to create a system for saving and loading the game's progress. Now, luckily, Unreal Engine already has a class built in for this. There's a SaveGame class that allows common loading and saving functionalities. And this allows the creation of multiple save files with one class. And essentially, you can choose which variables need to be saved and save them to a .sav file that can be loaded by Unreal Engine. And because the game instance class is one of the only classes that's persistent the entire time the game is running, the SaveGame class is commonly used in conjunction with the game instance class. Let's head into Unreal Engine and we'll create a SaveGame class for our project. Here I am back in my game, and I want to create a new folder for this in my Blueprints folder, and I'll call this Save Load. And I'm going to right click and say New Blueprint Class, and if we just type Save Game, we can see that it's the only thing that pops up. And I'm just going to call this BP Save Game. And when we open this up, there's nothing that really looks that different. The difference is when we start implementing this into our other classes, we'll have some nodes that we can gain access to. And we'll continue to add to this class over the next few lessons. But for right now, what I would like to do is that when the player selects their ship, I would like it so that every time they launch the game after that, that ship is still the selected ship. And in our game instance, we already have a variable here that's of type BP player ship, and it's a class reference. So let's create the same variable on our SaveGame class. Now, in my game instance, I want to have a reference to this class that we created. So I'm going to create a quick function that's going to try to load the SaveGame file as the game is initializing. And that way it's one of the first things that's happening, and then we have access to all those variables right off the bat. And we haven't really programmed anything into our game instance class yet. And the one difference is there's no begin play event. Instead, for the game instance class, there's an event called init. And if we hover over it, we can see it's the opportunity for Blueprints to handle the game instance being initialized, which means this is one of the very first things that's going to be called when the player launches the game. So here is where we can try to load in the SaveGame file and then load in any previously saved state that we had set up. And if we drag off here and type does save, you can see that there's a node called does SaveGame exist. And this takes two inputs, a string, which we will set up, and then this user index, which we don't need to worry about this for right now. For slot name though, we can have multiple save slots set up. And this can be something that you set up based upon your game, but for right now, I'm just gonna have one save slot that the player can use. So let's drag off of here, and I wanna create a variable from this. And I'm gonna call this save slot 1. Or 001. Now, if we did have multiple save slots, we would need to reformat this, but for right now, let's just get it working. And now, based upon whether or not there is a save slot, we want to have two different functionalities. So let's create a branch here. And if there is a save game, we can load game from slot, and we can use this same variable. Now here, we want to cast to our SaveGame class, and then I want to save this as a variable as well, and I'll just call it SaveGame. And this is what we're going to be referencing in other classes when we're trying to load and save variables to that save file. Now, this will work if there was previously a game saved, but if there's not, we also want to handle this branch. So I'll say create save, and there's a node create save game object. And for the class, we can use BP save game, the one that we just set up, and then we'll set that to this variable. But so far we haven't really done anything. We've just set this up essentially on init to check whether there's a save game file. If there isn't, we will create an object for that. And if there is, we'll just load from this save slot and then cast that to our save game. The next thing we want to do is save the selected ship to this variable. And the way this is the player can go through the ship, and eventually we'll have some more options here to configure their ship. And then once they have that all set and they press the back button, I think this is a good time to handle saving, because they'll have made all the modifications to their ship, they'll press back, and this means that this is the configuration that they want. So in my WBP ship select, let's find that event. And if we look here, we already have a reference to the game instance on this widget. So we can start by getting a reference to that, and then we'll get a reference to the save game, and then we can set selected ship here. And just to make sure this stays clean, let's collapse this into a function, and we'll call it save selected ship configuration, because we can always add to this later as we're creating additional variables. And here we need to know what to save, so we can also get that from our game instance. And then if we drag off here, there's a save game to slot, and this just needs a slot name, which we've already saved here, save slot 1. Keep in mind, if you want additional save slots, you'll need to go back and fix this. And this is all we need to do to save that information. The next thing we need to do is load from this when we're first initializing the game. And for now, we can do that in our game instance class right after we're loading game from slot. All we need to do is on this save game is say get selected ship, and then set that to this one on the game instance. And right now this is actually working. The issue is that back here in our menu game mode, we left this in a state where it's always just going to spawn ship 001 to that menu. So let's fix this really quick. After some troubleshooting, I realized that I made a mistake early on in the video. This variable here needs to actually have something assigned to it. So let's just put the same thing in there for now. And now when we load up, the ship is there as we intended. And if you go to your project files and you go to the saved folder and then save games, you'll now notice that there's a save slot 001.sav file. And this is that save file that we just created. And if you ever wanted to start from scratch and you want to simulate the player starting over from 0, you could just delete this file, and then that basically deletes any record of the save game existing. But now that we have that, every time we load the game, we will load that save file and then load any variables that are saved in there. And for the rest of the week, we're going to continue to add additional functionality to this save load. So we're going to create a bunch of new systems, and we're going to make sure that that data is saved every time. And the next lesson, we're actually going to add quite a few more variables to that functionality. So I'll see you in the next lesson.